Hello, everyone, and welcome into FCC Talk. I'm your host, John Rose, the Children and Family Minister here at First Christian Church, joined today by Chris Gregg, the Senior Minister here at First Christian Church. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, John?
I'm doing well, doing well. Glad to be with you podcasting today on FCC Talk. If this is your first time listening to FCC Talk, we just want to remind you that FCC Talk is a conversation between typically me and one of our ministers, maybe somebody from the church, just about current news events and things like that going on in the Christian world. Not necessarily local to us, but just have conversations about them and then maybe see if we can learn something from them. We do avoid politics. We don't get into that. We might mention some Bible, but by no means is this a sermon. Is this us telling you exactly what to think or anything like that? It's more or less just conversation about what's going on, inform a view of what's happening, and hopefully giving you maybe a different insight or a different perspective on how to maybe view things or think about things. So I think we have some good topics today, Chris. We have the Museum of the Bible. They have a new item that they're excited about. We have a wrestler who started his own ministry and he's telling Bible stories with it, which is very interesting. And then Dr. Stephen Lawson, he has gone through an issue. Normally, we don't talk about every single issue with moral failings by ministers and stuff. However, this is one that seems a little bit bigger and something that we would address today. So, Chris, I'm ready. You ready to get into it?
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into it. So, our very first subject today is the Museum of the Bible unveils the world's oldest Jewish book in a new exhibit. The Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. unveils what it claims is the world's oldest Jewish book, a 1,300-year-old manuscript from the Bimiyan Valley in Afghanistan. It is believed to be the earliest intact Hebrew codex predating others by more than a century. The book, named the Afghan Liturgic Choir, contains prayers, poems, and possibly the oldest known version of the Passover Haggadah. A lot of things here I have to read and probably pronounce. But a discovery in carbon dating astonished researchers as prior interest in the manuscript was minimal. The manuscript was first found in Afghanistan in 1997 and had an uncertain journey through the private sellers and dealers before being acquired by the Green family, founders of the Museum of the Bible, who initially misidentified it. The museum has worked to secure legitimacy for the exhibit, partnering with various Jewish and Afghan groups. Co-curator Sharon Mintz expressed confidence that upcoming scholarly publications will confirm its significance, saying the Braille book will lay all doubts to rest. Very interesting stuff here. Chris, what are some of just your thoughts and makes of this discovery? You think it's astonishing? You think it's crazy? Just what are your thoughts on it?
Just kind of cool that 1300 years ago, that prayer book, Jewish prayer book, was in existence. And according to what I read about it, it's still being used today in some form or fashion. And so, again, archaeology kind of shows that there was a Jewish community in Afghanistan, which I find fascinating because all we hear about Afghanistan is the Islamic influence there today. And so, again, in the Middle East, all over, there were Jewish communities around.
Yeah, it definitely supports the idea that before, Jesus was around, there were Jewish communities, and even after that as well, there were the
Mm-hmm.
Jews and the Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think anytime we can get an archaeological discovery like this, it's fascinating to think about what it means and how does it impact our view and thought process of what went on back at that time. I think a lot of churches maybe talk about it more than we do. We still talk about it a good amount, but a lot of churches kind of talk about the culture of the days back then. And one of the things that helps us understand what the culture was like and what went on back then, and maybe why something Jesus said was significant, is discoveries like this. So anytime we can get a discovery like this, it always is helpful to me, and I always enjoy reading what scholars and other people have to say about it and what it means, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert in every single piece here of this stuff, probably not even an expert in most of it, but but I do enjoy learning about it. So, Chris, my question to you is, you know, that's obviously very important to me, but my mind also goes to like the Museum of the Bible, right? And the Ark is another example of,
Hmm.
just large places that commemorate events, that commemorate different items like this book or something like that. I mean, how important is it to you that we have things like the Ark in Cincinnati and the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., that, it's not just for us as Christians, but I mean, it really anybody can go there. Anybody can learn about it, and anybody can go. I mean, how important is that to you?
Hmm. I think it's really fascinating that the Museum of the Bible ended up with this codex from 1300 years ago, potentially the oldest Jewish book in existence today. And it is at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., which I feel like I've been everywhere in Washington, D.C. at one time or another, and will probably be back out on the East Coast for family reasons again. And I'll probably stop by the Museum of the Bible just to see what it is. That sounds fascinating to me.
Yeah, they had it there when I still lived out in Virginia, and we went to it one time, and it was amazing. I mean, really everything that they had there, the storytelling of everything in the Bible was done very well. I'll be honest, I was a little concerned going there. Was this made by Christians? Was this made, by people who are maybe trying to present the Bible in a way that's not true. I didn't know what to expect, but when I got there and I began to experience it and I began to look and see everything, I was like, wow, this is really well done. I think things like that, and like I said, also the Ark down in Cincinnati, which can show so many cool things with just how big and expansive the Ark is, number one, but then the science and everything that goes behind it too. Have you ever been down to the Ark, Chris?
I've not been to the Ark. I've been to the Creation Museum. I was
Okay.
just looking on the Museum of the Bible, and it's only been around for 7 years, since 2017. So it's
Yeah.
not very old. And I haven't been back to DC, I don't think, since then. So I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it opened right before we left. We moved here in, what was that, 18, I think, when we moved here. But yeah, it opened right before, and so we made it a point that we wanted to go.
Hmm.
DC was maybe about an hour from us. It really wasn't all that far of a drive, but DC traffic, but it took about an hour to drive to one of the subway stations and then
Hmm.
go in from there, which we always enjoyed doing that as well. But yeah, so we saw it right before we left, and it was really, 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 really cool to see. There was another one called and this one isn't Christian related, but it's called the Newseum. It's all about how like news started and kind of where news has taken itself today.
Hmm.
And so it was really interesting to see how news began with writings and then to radio and then to websites and then now to like with YouTube and everything out there that you can share news
Streaming.
in just so many different ways. It was
Yep.
really,
Never
really
heard of
interesting.
that museum either.
It's actually gone now. It was around for I think 4 or 5 years. Some of these museums they kind of switch
There
up
you go.
every now and then. So it was in one of those locations where it was around for a little bit and then they put something else there instead. I don't know what they put there instead.
Hmm.
But I'm glad to see this Bible one is stuck around. It's
Yep.
not just one
Yep.
they had for a little bit and
Yep.
got rid of. So. All right, Chris. Well, I think good conversation there on that one. Let's move on to the wrestling one. All right. I think this one's a little interesting, and I'm kind of excited to talk about it and get your thoughts on it. So, Joe Banzoff, a former heroin addict, turned his life around after going through Lycombe County Drug Court and staying clean for 12 years. He found Salvation Pro Wrestling Academy, combining professional wrestling with Bible stories such as David and Goliath. Banzoff has inspired a rare wrestling program with biblical themes in the UK and Texas. His academy features wrestlers portraying Bible characters to share moral messages, aiming to bring people closer to faith through performances. The wrestling matches, which last 5 to 15 minutes, present moral lessons rooted in trust and faith in God. It's pure joy, said Damon Dante, who participated in a reenactment of Cain and Abel. Pastor Steve Cutter of Fair Lawn Community Church, where the Academy holds events, praised Banzaff's life transformation with his commitment to teaching people about a better path, which also expressing initial uncertainty about how the church would respond. Chris, it's kind of a unique story. I don't know if I've ever heard of a wrestling ministry. I have now, so that's cool. But what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's very interesting, John. I don't know what to think about it other than if people are interested in wrestling, or it sounds like it's kind of
It's kind of like a drama piece to
staged,
it, right?
and it's like wrestling drama with a positive Christian message. I could be all for that. I don't know that I would participate, and or it might be interested. There probably is a YouTube of that, so you probably can look that up on YouTube and see something like
So
that
you're
on
not
YouTube.
gonna get in the ring, is what you're saying?
Not at this point in my life. I think that I might find that as interesting entertainment, but not my cup of tea.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever get in the ring either. I think they'd have to really twist my arm if they ever wanted me to do that. But it is a really interesting story. Just reading about first off the guy with a story of
Yep.
previously being a heroin addict and having to being able to recover from that and finding salvation. That's obviously very very cool to hear. But then
Yep.
the creativity for him to think, I love wrestling and I love the Bible. So I'm somehow going to
Going to
marry these two
combine
into
them.
something
So you
together.
jump in your underwear and you start wrestling. That's what I say.
There you go.
So,
I did think it was interesting that I wish I could find the exact quote of it, but they said something like, "Oh, Jacob wrestled with God, and now we wrestle for God," or something like that. I forget exactly
yeah, if I
what the
remember,
quote
yeah,
was.
Jacob wrestled with God. You remember that story in the Old Testament? Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
very interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yeah.
Chris, it did spark my thought process of, we hear all kinds of stories of people in churches, whether it be starting ministries or getting involved in ministries and, something they kind of do on the side with maybe their normal full-time job. I mean, how could other members of churches, maybe not even just our church, but just members of churches wherever they are, where can they start, ministries or being making impacts in other ministries in their community? Maybe it's being involved in something on Sunday morning, or maybe it's being involved in something during the week. I mean, my first thought is always like a homeless shelter, to try and do something like that, but obviously this is much more creative than that. Do you have any thoughts on how members can get involved in areas like that?
I just think, it's a calling of God. Obviously, this Joe who started this wrestling ministry, if you will, just had a calling, and then he used his gifts and talents and worked with the church and made it happen. And so I think a lot of people have a calling and they need to pursue that rather than place that on someone else. That's a professional quote minister's role. No, I think God calls people to different things. And so if wrestling ministry is your thing, or if the homeless is your thing, whatever that is, and God is calling you, then He's going to enable a way for you to participate. Obviously, the local body of Christ, if we can help in some way, that would be the way to go. If that's something that suits the mission and the vision of the church. I don't know how
Yeah.
wrestling ministry for Jesus fits in, other than it might be an evangelistic appeal to people that like pro wrestling that way.
I mean, you look in the articles and it looks like there's people in every seat in the pictures in the articles. So there's
Mhm.
there's something appealing there. I'd go if there was a wrestling ministry in Brazil. I'd go. I'd go check it out and see what we got there.
Yep.
Things that come to my mind that, and maybe you can add to this if you remember other ones, but things come to my mind that people have started and worked on and the church has kind of come alongside them and helped, but really people have kind of done it all on their own. It's not really anything the church has done other than support them. Is sowing seeds of hope is one for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
Leah Shook and Mary Jo Allenbaugh, they started that. or at least they run it now. I don't remember the
Yep.
inception
They
of it when it
started.
began.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So they started that. What was that? 25 years ago. Their
Yep.
25th year this
Yep.
year. Which, by the
Yep.
way, if you want to donate to that, you can go to the church website and help donate for their
Hmm.
25th year
Hmm.
anniversary. Very cool stuff they're doing. In addition to that, Jennifer Miller and Kaylee Pettiford, they've been kind of doing this Christmas thing for us, what, the past 2 or 3 years with,
Yep.
I don't know if
Yep.
it has an exact name other than, kind of Christmas program to
Christmas
help
project,
out.
I think.
Yeah,
We call it the
yeah,
Christmas project.
yeah. So they've done that. They've gotten involved with the school and done that other kind of stuff. Is there
Hmm.
anything else that's gone on here at the church that you can recall? Those are the
Not
first two
of
that come off my top of my
recent.
head.
We participate with Youth for Christ Campus Life. We
Right.
did started that 25, 30 years ago. There are other things as well, but it just takes a person with passion to do that. I was thinking about this wrestling thing, that would be a road show. I mean, you could go from community to community and do that as a road show, and I think that would draw a crowd, kind of like a, a Christian celebrity thing. Every once in a while, you might have a Miss America or somebody with a celebrity with a testimony or something like that would come through. And so I could see that wrestling as a road show, that they would travel the country with that
Yeah, yeah,
and
that would be
encourage
really, really
Christians with
interesting.
the stories of God and the power of life change in their testimonies. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I think anytime you
Yeah,
can
but
just
I could
simply.
see you in your underwear wrestling, John. You could be,
Yeah,
this would
probably not.
inspire little boys to get in their underwear and wrestle like, Dick the Bruiser and some of that WWF stuff that they do today.
Yeah,
It'd
yeah,
be
I'd probably
fun.
be more apt to maybe play a basketball game or something. Wrestling, not really my thing.
Not my thing.
Um, yeah,
Yep.
it sounds interesting, but no, not really my thing.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's kind of some of the misconceptions sometimes people have is that oh, we have to make this great big thing, and I have to know everything getting into it, and I think sometimes like it sounds like in this wrestling thing, really all they're trying to do is just point people to biblical stories and trying to help people know
Yep.
about the Bible, and really at the end of the day, if that's what you're doing, if you're just pointing people to God and the stories and the Bible, that there's obviously fruit in that in
There
itself.
you go.
So
There you go.
there you go.
Just a creative way of Bible storytelling.
Exactly, exactly. So I'm gonna tell the kids about that one for sure. They're gonna get
There
a
you
kick
go.
out of that on Sunday morning when I tell
Yep.
them there's a wrestling
Yep.
ministry. Of course, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe they're gonna want to start one if I tell them that.
You never know.
Yeah, we're not gonna have wrestling on Sunday mornings. Don't worry, parents.
Yep.
I will
Yep.
not make a ring and have your kids wrestle on Sunday mornings.
Yep. Sounds
Um,
sounds like a fascinating idea.
as long as I don't flood the gym, right,
Yep,
Chris?
right. Yeah. And knowing the art, wrestling, you never know. Wrestle some bears or something.
There you go.
Bears and box with some kangaroos and what else? Alligator wrestling. You could do that. There's all kinds of things you could do.
There you go. All kinds of things. All right, Chris. Let's move on to our last story before we start coming up with too many more things that we could do. All right, so Chris, Dr. Stephen Lawson wiped from the Masters Seminary and Grace Community Church websites. Dr. Stephen Lawson has been removed from all ministry roles at Grace
Mhm.
Community Church, the Masters Seminary, and Trinity Bible Church in Dallas, Texas, following his involvement in an inappropriate relationship. Both GCC and TMS have erased all references to Lawson from their website. One Passion Ministry, which Lawson founded, also released a statement confirming his resignation and removed his resources. At the Men of the Word conference, Austin Duncan addressed Lawson's absence, stating, "One of our previously scheduled speakers permanently disqualified himself from pastoral ministry this week and brought disgrace to the name of Christ." Duncan urged attendees to remember 1 Timothy 4:16, which emphasizes the importance of integrity, watchfulness, and consistency in living out one's faith, particularly in the moments of moral failure like this. Chris, I guess we'll just start here. Did you know very much about Steve Lawson, and just what are your thoughts on this story overall?
Until today, I really hadn't heard of him before. So this is kind of a new one for me. I just know I preached last weekend and talked about the Southern Baptists having a lot of significant, like 4 megachurch pastors have been disqualified from ministry in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of recent, and he would be not a megachurch pastor, but a church leader that has had some immoral activity, alleged immoral, if you will, activity, and has been removed from the master's college seminary per se. So again, I think that's disappointing. I think the theme of accountability has to be involved in ministry, and how do you do that? I don't know. It's just a shame because it hurts people's trust and the integrity of the church and church leaders, and it happens all too often.
I agree. One thing, it seems like every single week I go to Christian, news websites to find stories for FCC Talk and talking about this stuff. It seems like every single time I met with at least one new situation with a
Mm-hmm.
pastor who has done something. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a number of things that we haven't talked about on here just because if we open it up, we'd have one on every single episode. It
Right,
seems like, and I don't want that to be what this turns into.
right,
Tune in for our pastor struggle segment or
right,
immoral pastor segment. And I don't know
right,
if I want to highlight that all the time, but
right.
there are plenty of stories out there. I mean, there was a story of a minister who put a camera in the bathroom at church. It was a
Yeah.
story of everything that's going on with Gateway Church right now. They just apparently removed the membership of a once really loyal congregant who had some you know had some disappointments with the way Gateway Church has been handling things, and they didn't like that. And so, if we let it happen, we would be able to talk about it every single time. And so, for me, more than
Mm-hmm.
anything, it's just sad. I mean, you and
Mm-hmm.
I are both in ministry. You've been in ministry much longer than me. I've been in it for oh, 8 years now.
Yeah.
Um, so I haven't been in it nearly as long as you, but I know the struggles that it can have. Obviously, I've never done anything like these things, and neither of you. But it is tough, and I think that there's a lot of issues like that
Mm-hmm.
going on. I guess Chris, in my mind, you talked about accountability. Is there anything else? I think that's a great idea that pastors need to be held accountable, and they need to make sure there's somebody else holding them accountable at
Right,
all times. But I mean, is there any fix to this? Is there anything with that can be done, especially for, I mean, my heart hurts most for the people who are being led by these
right.
ministers, and then they walk away and they say, should I even go to church anymore? Should I
Yeah,
even have a faith anymore if this person that was leading me
yeah.
before? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I like what Billy Graham did years and years ago was that he determined not to slam local pastors in his crusades. He was above board in all financial transactions in the Billy Graham ministry. And so they had accountability and transparency in all their financial dealings and offerings and things like that, multiple layers of checks and balances. And then when Billy Graham traveled and when he was by himself, he always had an entourage. So if he entered an elevator or entered a hotel room, men would enter those places before him. So there wasn't those opportunities. What I feel like a lot of times, I think, pastors, senior pastors, professors have a lack of an accountability, an aloneness, some of those type things. You just have to avoid the appearance of evil. You can't do all of those things, but you have to be very careful with your relationships with the opposite sex, the appearances of those, making sure those relationships are not inappropriate in what you say or how you say or innuendo, all of those type things. You just have to be very careful with that. And again, sometimes it's not even the pastor; it's their spouse, and so you hope people will live a moral life and receive the rewards of living a good moral life, as opposed to risking their integrity and their credibility and their reputation because of these things that they're doing. And it starts in the mind, so you can't control, you can't control another's mind, but it just seems like there's just so much of that stuff. And I don't, I get it in one way. We're all tempted the same way as Jesus was tempted, but I also see it being very short-sighted, and not the reward is not worth the uh, consequences of your reputation and your life. Now, that's all I really can say. I think if you're struggling, that you need to get with a counselor and maybe get an accountability partner, buddy of the same sex, and
Yeah. Yeah.
where we focus our minds, and being in the Word daily and praying and those type of things. It just it's a train wreck or
Right.
shipwreck, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really tough. I think you hit on a lot of things that kind of stem for this stuff, maybe a little bit more, and I think it's hard for people to sometimes understand until they're living through it. And I think that's true in most cases with most occupations and lifestyles and stuff like that. It's hard for you to understand what people go through until you're living through it yourself. But I know a good number of ministers who they've not, I don't want to say they've not done it because that makes it sound like their fault. I don't know if it's necessarily their fault, but they've not been able to grow a large community in their life that is, kind of like their community, which
Hmm.
sounds counterintuitive because you think, oh, you work at a church, that is a community. Yeah, but sometimes it can be harder to be a part of that community and feel like you are a part of that community when it's your
Hmm.
job, right? And that's not to disparage the church or disparage being a part of a church or anything like that. I'm just saying that can be a harder aspect of
Hmm.
getting involved. And
Hmm.
I know, that's something that I've had to deal with. As I started ministry, I feel much better about that kind of stuff here than I previously did at my other job. That doesn't mean anything was done better or anything happened or anybody was better or anything like that.
Hmm.
It just means that I think I fit here a little bit better and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of ministers go through struggles because of loneliness and because of
Hmm.
power. And I think you're right that having people around you, whether it's an entourage to watch you, or sometimes just an entourage of people that, are willing to, kind of be your buddies, right? I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
I find it hard to believe that Billy Graham probably didn't befriend a number of those people that were
Right,
around him all the time
right.
and have good relationships with them and talk to them and learn more about them and stuff like that. So, it's hard because it's not necessarily anybody's fault sometimes, but it does go back on the minister to make sure that they are, having people be accountable of them in their lives and making sure that they make good moral decisions and do what needs to be done. So it's definitely tough and tough to talk about sometimes because, like I said, you and I get this a little bit more than maybe other people do. But we have to. When you're a leader, you have to be accountable and you have to be responsible with what you're
Hmm.
leading. So
Hmm.
yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on that, Chris?
Nope. I just say pray for those folks, and remember that we all have temptations, and we're all susceptible to certain things, and we just have to ask. I mean, Jesus prayed in the model prayer, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And I think that that's a valid prayer in ministry or in our day-to-day walk with Christ.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think almost everybody out there is leading somebody, and so you need to ask God to help you avoid the temptation and, like you said, deliver us from evil. So
mhm.
Great stuff there. All right, Chris, I think that's our episode for us. Appreciate you coming on here. Anything going on in the church or anything like that you want to tell people about?
We're having the 25th anniversary for celebrating Seams of Hope. We're in a new series coming this week with First Timothy called The Apprentice. A lot of good stuff is happening in children's ministry and student ministry, so kids need to be there. We've got country days and some great things coming up this fall. So just all around, things are going great, and I hope you can join us.
Very good. Very good. All right, everybody. We appreciate you listening to FCC Talk, and we'll hope to see you again on Sunday morning or whenever we see you next. So thanks, everybody. Have a good one.